Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar, which is part of the government's Beyond Brexit virtual event with various sessions over the next couple of days. My name is Graham Smith, and on behalf of Jersey Business, we're delighted to be hosting this morning's session, which is focused on business readiness, and in particular, the Brexit checklist for importers that the government has developed. Understandably, COVID-19 has dominated the news since March this year as we navigate our way through the pandemic. Brexit, however, also remains a key business challenge. Whilst there still remains uncertainty over whether there will be a deal and what form it will take, one thing is certain. On the 1st of January 2021, the transition period with the EU for the UK ends, and that means controls will be placed on movement of goods between Jersey and the EU. This is less than 50 business days away. And I'll say that again, this is less than 50 business days away. So preparation is key, and hopefully this morning's session will assist in that preparation. Before we get into the session, as ever with events, I have a little bit of housekeeping that I just need to cover. For those of you that are on Zoom sessions, can I make sure that you actually mute and also mute your microphone and actually turn off your camera? Otherwise, it could be quite interesting if you start to interrupt and have dogs running behind you, but hopefully that won't be the case. Secondly, in terms of questions, we'll cover questions towards the end of the session, but if you can use the Slido, which details should have been sent to you by email, quite simply, if you log on to slido.com and then hashtag Beyond Brexit, you'll be able to post your questions. Those questions that we can't answer, we'll pick up after the event. To help us this morning, I'm delighted that we have two senior customs officers who are right at the heart of Jersey's Brexit planning. And rather than me introduce them, I'll happily pass over to them to tell us in a couple of minutes in terms of what you do within the customs areas and initial thoughts. Paul.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Paul Ikobishaw. I've been with customs for 30 years. My role at the moment is a senior manager for goods control. And effectively, Brexit, for customs purposes, has sort of landed in my lap, and I've been working on it for 3 years. So hopefully today we'll be able to send some messaging out to you in relation to the lessons that we've learnt and the preparations that need to be done, and get some feedback, and try and persuade trade to prepare. That is the main reason that we're here today, and that's just a little of my background.
Thanks, Paul. Three years working on Brexit. Do you get a badge of honour for that, and
I'm hoping
a medal,
for
and a medal perhaps?
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to introduce Simon. And Simon obviously is dressed as a customs officer should be dressed.
Yes. Good morning. My name's Simon Blackmore. I'm a senior officer within Customs Immigration. Just over 21 years within the service, and my day-to-day role, I work to Paul as the senior manager, and I look after a team on the operational side of about 10 officers and admin staff, and I've been involved with Paul to a lesser extent, but more on the operational side.
Thank you, Simon. And obviously, a big part of today is preparation. And Paul, kind of, what do you want the listeners who are dialing in? And I think we have about over 100 who've actually dialed in, which is excellent. What do you want the key things, the takeaways from your perspective from this morning's session?
Okay, yeah. I mean, there is. It's a complex issue. There are a lot of things to talk about. So I think we're going to focus on the high level issues today. I'd like to point out that there is some information already on gov.je. There's a Beyond Brexit Trade Facility, Trade Ready page, which has got a number of links to information and guidance. There's also another page which is Brexit and End of Transition Period Business Checklist, which again I would encourage people and businesses to look at. There's a lot of information there, a lot of links to various guidance both here and in the UK. So that's the first message I'd like to get across. At this point as well, if there are inquiries, we are always open to receiving those inquiries and arranging appointments on one-to-one basis. Again, we appreciate businesses operate, in their own environment, and they differ. One size doesn't fit all. So we're keen to get that message across that you're more than welcome to come in. Just to reinforce, I think what Graham's been saying, businesses trading with the EU will be impacted regardless of the outcome of the EU negotiations. A deal means that most goods would be free, they'd be tariff-free, but there still will be an awful lot of paperwork and bureaucracy that goes with that. A no deal means that there's paperwork, bureaucracy, and potentially tariffs. So, at this point, we don't know whether there's a deal or a no deal, but you need to factor that into your preparations. I think that I'll just run through a few bullet points here because there is a lot to get across, and I don't want to delay things any more than I have to in terms of getting to the questions. But I think it's essential to reiterate that direct trade with the UK won't be affected. There's going to be no change to the way that trade and goods move between here and the UK, and therefore GST and excise won't be affected in the way that it's administered. So today we're not going to be talking about that direct trade or GST or excise. If you are a business and you're trading with the EU, then you really need to understand what your supply chains are, the way that they work. Are your goods bought from a UK supplier, but the goods actually originate in the EU? That's one question. So if so, prices might rise because there are going to be additional costs getting them into the UK, and there could be tariffs. So that's one thing you need to consider if you're just getting a supply from the UK. Are you trading goods directly with the EU? Well, that's slightly different. If you're trading goods directly with the EU, you need to be prepared to do full customs declarations, and you also need to be aware of EU regulations, because it's not just the UK that are imposing these controls. Actually, there's an awful lot of extra bureaucracy, both for EU exporters and EU importers. Do your goods transit through the UK before they come here? If they do, you need to speak to your logistics people and make arrangements to enable those goods to transit through the UK down to here so that it can be cleared in Jersey. So those are the three areas that you need to consider depending on what your business model looks like. You need to be aware that when the goods arrive, they will be a requirement for a customs declaration, and a customs declaration goes beyond a GST declaration, which most people are familiar with. It's just the value. A customs declaration, you're going to need the commodity code of the good, you're going to need the value, the customs value of the good, and you need to know the origin, the country of origin. All that's needed. You need to consider how you're going to submit those customs declarations to us. We have an online electronic platform that enables submission, so we would encourage you to look at those options. We'd also like to think that you consider getting people trained to do these declarations, because they can be complex. And again, there are links to training providers, particularly in the UK, that you can do online courses for your staff, if that's appropriate. Otherwise, you could consider a customs agent who does the relevant paperwork on your behalf, but there could be a fee attached to that. You need to consider other border requirements, such as health certificates, depending on the type of goods that you're moving. So, as I say, there's a lot there to take in. Our message is to really think about your supply chains, how your goods get here. There is guidance on gov.je, and we will be putting a lot more on in the coming weeks.
Thanks very much, Paul. So just to kind of clarify, if a business is doing direct trade with the UK, i.e. not directly with the EU, what you're saying is if the Brexit implications in relation to the process don't change, so that should remain the same.
Yes, I mean we've signed a customs. Jersey signed an arrangement with the UK, the UK CD's customs arrangement, and within that arrangement, all goods move freely as they do now.
Yeah.
So there is no change in the way that businesses trade with their suppliers in the UK, as long as those goods don't originate from a third country.
Am I right, though, in assuming a business risk here is in terms of the UK supplier, in terms of their supply chain? If their goods are coming from the UK for the EU and are impacted or delayed, is that presumably is a business risk that businesses need to speak to their suppliers in the UK to make sure that they're prepared.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So if those goods do originate from the EU, the question is, where will those goods be cleared? If they're cleared into the UK and then they go to some sort of warehouse or hub in the UK, then a lot of the paperwork is taken care of at that point. But clearly the onward cost of that good could be inflated because of the additional tariff rates or the additional non-tariff barriers, such as the administrative fees, the agents' clearance fees.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a common theme here, and that is communication, in the sense that it's really important that business leaders talk to all links in the chain to understand the potential and the consequential risk that may flow in terms of that. So if we try and now focus obviously at where the supply chain is in the EU effectively, clearly that's where a significant change. It would probably help if we can look at some of the scenarios that could kind of play that out. And you covered some of the points, but it'd be good to actually try and go into a little bit more detail. So if we use as an example, you're buying directly from an EU supplier, at the moment is shipping directly to you here in Jersey. So you're buying from an EU supplier, but they are shipping directly to you in Jersey. What practically will change?
So that's a good example. If you are receiving goods directly from an EU supplier, you would assume then that they would arrive on the southern route, probably through St Malo, or if there's an air freight through the airport. You will need to submit a customs declaration to us before those goods arrive to enable them to be cleared, and you'll have to pay any relevant duties if there are any. It's a big change from what happens at the moment, and it is something that will happen regardless of whether there's a deal or a no deal. And I think that's probably one of the most important takeaways from this. It's that first pinch point as the goods arrive in the island, that if business want them to be delivered quickly and efficiently, then they need to look at the facilities that we've got to enable them to do that, which is a range of approved statuses, which we can cover later. Okay.
So just kind of following that through, if the products come to Jersey via the UK, will anything change in that space? We had the previous question in terms of that. What's your thoughts on that? So, in other words, they're coming from the EU, but they come via the UK?
If they come via the UK from the EU, there are potentially two changes. One is whether the goods are cleared into the UK at the point of entry in the UK, or the second is whether they transit down to Jersey through the UK, in which case you'll need to speak to your logistics people in the UK to make those arrangements, or you can actually become an authorised transit operator, which again you'd need to come in to us to talk about. But it's the issue is suspending the duty on those goods while they're in the UK and suspending the VAT.
So that covers the northern route in terms of coming via the northern route. If it comes via the southern route from San Malo, what's the implications there, and what's likely to change?
I think as really spoke about before, it is the fact that it's customs declarations, pre-arrival declarations, and then working with us so that those declarations can be made as painless as possible, so that we can enable those goods to move through onto the market as quickly as possible.
And kind of whenever you go onto Google or anything and look in terms of Brexit, there's loads of acronyms that are starting to kind of come through. And one of the ones you see quite a bit of is the EORI number, which I think stands for Economic Operator Registration and Identification. There's lots more. Just tell us a little bit about the importance of that number and getting those details from as far as the trade's concerned.
EORIs are, yes, you're right, Economic Operator Registration Number. They are used at the moment in the UK and the EU. It's a VAT reference. Of course, we don't have VAT here, so we don't issue EORI numbers. But they are used as a reference number to identify the business. Now, we have provided a link on the Beyond Brexit page to some substantial information about EORIs. I know traders are getting a lot of questions. We're of the opinion that you don't need them for goods that are actually arriving here, but it seems that some UK traders are asking for them. What we'd recommend is that if you're in doubt, obtain an EORI number. But as I say, there is a really useful link on the Beyond Brexit Trade page to explain them in more detail, and also some links through to how you can apply.
One of the things you mentioned in terms of goods that will come through is potentially using other third parties who may be able to assist, and you often hear of customs agents and as a new business kind of setting up. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sorts of support that is out there from third parties who may be able to help some of our smaller businesses?
I mean, there is going to be administrative cost, there's no doubt, and there will be more bureaucracy. Customs decks are complicated, particularly if you're in heavy manufacturing or industry. I think for some of the audience today, the goods they import are going to be the same each time they import them. So there is a balance between doing the customs declarations yourselves, training people to do them yourselves, but there is an option to have them completed on your behalf by a customs agent. We know that there are a number of businesses in the island that are looking to fill that gap and provide that service. We'll be providing a list of those in about 4 weeks' time once we've gathered the information. And I think it's something that business needs to consider, to enable them, if you like, to pass that headache on to somebody else. But certainly more information will be coming out in the next few weeks, and in that interim period I would suggest you think about whether or not you go down that route, or whether you're comfortable with doing the declarations yourselves.
Okay, that's really good. Thank you. I want to focus a little bit more on the actual formalities of customs in terms of bringing goods through. So, as a business, what do I need to do to get products cleared through customs practically? In terms of, say, for example, do we need to check to see if imported goods are liable for tariff rates and what have you? What are your views on that?
Again, you would benefit from doing some extensive work to answer that exact question. There are links again in the documents that we've put out to the UK Global Tariff, and what the UK Global Tariff allows you to do is it enables you to check the good that you're importing. You need the commodity code, and then it will tell you whether or not there's a tariff rate attached, and indeed whether there are any other customs measures attached, such as a requirement for a license. So if you are a business and you're importing goods, and you want to find out whether or not your good will be impacted by a no deal where tariffs are applied, then that's what we recommend you do. So at least you're prepared for that, whether or not you're buying directly or whether or not they're arriving here from or via the UK.
Okay, good, thank you. So if you're a business leader at the end of this session, in terms of their checklist, in terms of what conversations they should have with their suppliers, which I think we've said is critical. What are the key things that you think that they should have be able to say, yes, I've covered that with my supplier, my EU supplier? EU suppliers are going to have to produce the same sort of information when they export those goods from the EU into the UK. So a lot of the information that is needed here for import, the EU supplier will have actually provided. So again, it's making sure that you contact the EU supplier and you work out how those goods are going to move to Jersey. In the past, there's been a temptation to put them through the UK. That may not be the best option moving forward. It may remain a good option, but it might not be the best option. So you really do need to speak to those suppliers. They're going to be keen to continue supplying you, so it's in everyone's interest to do so. But conversations with them are essential. Okay, and kind of it's also the business needs to ensure in terms of that it is resourced to be able to both ask those questions, but also the administration around this, which is absolutely critical in terms of how they do that, and that person is skilled and trained to do that. Okay, any kind of other things to consider where there's perhaps other suppliers in the UK or pricing? What are your thoughts on that?
I think again, if you source your goods from a supplier in the UK, it is, I think, advisable to speak to that supplier to find out where the goods originate. So if the goods do originate from the EU or third country, that supplier in the UK is clearly going to have some administrative costs to add to their business model. And that then could influence the price that a trader here pays for those goods. And again, it's understanding what that process is and how that's going to be built in to the pricing that the supplier puts on those goods, what the difference will be, because that may have to be reflected in the price that the customer pays when the goods are actually sold in Jersey.
So there's a lot of obviously communication with your supplier. From your experience, are the EU suppliers in terms of preparedness, are they in a good place as far as this is concerned? In terms of, so if our business is now contacting them this afternoon, what's your kind of thoughts as to?
It's a good question. I think EU suppliers who have got a global presence are probably going to be much more familiar, because they'd be dealing with these sort of customs controls already. If you're looking at smaller and medium-sized EU companies who maybe have only ever traded with the member states within the EU bloc, then I think they're going to be facing similar challenges to our local traders here. It is again important to speak to them and try and iron out what the issues will be, because you really don't want to be waiting until the 1st or 2nd of January to find out what they are. And it is a collaboration between business at this point. It's not something that we as customs can predict. We don't really have our finger on the pulse as to the business readiness in the EU, if I'm truthful.
Yeah, it is a real challenge. So that's the importance for speaking to, if you've not done already, to speaking to the suppliers now. Is there any kind of view, and also from the UK, in terms of potential time delays here, in terms of processing and what have you, and in terms of what we do and also what's done in the EU?
Again, I can't speak on what will happen in the EU. I think if there are any exporters here, that's a slightly different subject. But certainly in terms of processing once the goods arrive in Jersey, we will be ensuring that as soon as they hit the border here, everything will be done to clear those goods as soon as possible. We are looking at a period of 6 months where the rules are going to have to be slightly relaxed to enable that to happen. We're not expecting this to work perfectly on day one, as much from our perspective as it is for the traders. So the message there is that when the goods arrive, the intention is just to move them as quickly as we can onto the market, and we'll do what we can to help business with that process.
And kind of timing and kind of potential delays and what have you, and obviously the potential additional costs, that all impacts on cash flow. And one of the things we'd very much, from a Jersey business perspective, encourage businesses to do is, once you've spoken to your suppliers and have a feel for the time delays or the time processes and the costs, you need to factor that into your cash flow in terms of how that's going to be really important here. In terms of impact on that. One other area for businesses to consider is to look at, and I'm really able to comment on, is insurance and contracts in terms of the terms and conditions. What's your experience and thoughts around that, Paul or Simon?
That's right. This is something that previously local traders haven't really had to consider, but there's something called Incoterms, which is based on the value of the goods. So when you're valuing your goods for customs purposes, you normally have to include a freight charge or freight as part of that value. But there are different types of freight. Some people will arrange to have the duties paid by the exporter and the freight charges paid by the exporter. Some will have a freight charge where those charges are picked up by the importer, and there are different codes in relation to those different options. I think in terms of contracts, when you're negotiating with your supplier in the EU, the Incoterms will become very important, because that's part of the model, that's part of your pricing, and you'll need to put that code into the customs declaration, so that it enables us to calculate the value of the goods and therefore the value, the duty if applicable. Again, there's a link to the Incoterms on one of the documents that we've put onto gov.je, and you're right, Graham, it's an important factor that you need to consider. And I think broader issues in terms of insurance, the movement of those goods in the EU, how they're going to be transported, need to be factored into that as well.
Okay, so where a business actually has their own small fleet of vans or what have you that is going collecting in the EU, what are the considerations that they have to have with regards to that? That's
a slightly difficult question for me to answer in terms of how they operate in the EU. It's beyond our influence as to how the EU will impose controls on vehicles and permits and licenses. So the advice there would be you need to find that out yourself. Once the vehicles return to the island, then things won't be any different as to what they are now. But there could be new rules in terms of Jersey vehicles moving in the EU, because we will be considered a third country. We are no longer part of the EU as a member state, or no longer part of the EU. So those vehicles could actually be treated as third country, and there will be customs processes attached to that. So it's an important thing for those companies to consider. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Simon, from your perspective, what are some of the key considerations that the business leaders need to be thinking about practically?
I think practically from that perspective, as Paul mentioned, it's really having that relationship with the supplier, knowing exactly what the type of goods are that you're importing. Because in order to make that declaration, you need to have that in-depth detail. We will be reviewing the declarations and authorising them where appropriate, but we don't have that level of detail of the goods that you're actually importing. So one of the, without wishing to go into too much detail, but one of the key parts of that is having the correct commodity code. And that's required for every single item that you're importing, and every single item has a different commodity code depending on the type of goods and whereabouts they're coming from. So that's a really important thing, and a lot of suppliers we've seen are starting to gear up for that, and they're starting to let their customers know what the commodity codes are for the goods that they're exporting.
So, kind of from your perspective, how many businesses have been contacting you in terms of their preparedness for the actual details? Obviously, you mentioned you're speaking to some of the businesses there. Do you feel that Jersey is well prepared, or do you feel that a number of businesses still need to look at this a lot more closely?
I think we've had a significant amount of trader engagement. One of my colleagues has been working on that for the last year or so, and we have spoken to a lot of businesses. They've come in, we've outlined the requirements, but it still does surprise me on a day-to-day basis, receiving calls or emails from traders, and when we outline the requirements, they seem to be still quite surprised at the level of detail that's required, and probably not anticipated maybe the additional bureaucracy compared to importing at the moment. And that's come as a little bit of surprise. And you mentioned earlier about the number of business days until the 1st of January. I think really that as a message from myself, maybe from an operational side of things, is really take notice now. Start to do this before the Christmas rush comes in, because it's a busy time particularly on the retail side of things. So don't delay it until the 20th of December or just after Christmas, because that really will be too late, I think.
And I think it's obviously on the website, and I was looking this morning, the checklist that you've put up there and the information behind that is a really useful tool in terms of that all business leaders, and I'm sure you'll encourage them to go through that and look at that in terms of the key areas. And I presume quite a bit of work went into actually to bringing that online and what have you. Just tell me a little bit about how important that businesses very carefully go through each area of that. How important is that?
We can't really emphasise it too much, and there is a good checklist here, but as Paul mentioned earlier, there is going to be some additional information that we're currently working on that will go live in a couple of weeks, and that will provide a little bit more detail as to the different types of procedures and some of the terminology that businesses need to be aware of, because when you're communicating with customs, we may reply in a certain language that at the moment is maybe not familiar with some businesses. So they really need to get on board with that. And as Paul mentioned, one of the key things to look at is training and training staff, because if you are going to take on that responsibility for making the declarations, those staff need to be fully trained, and there are a number of different courses and training providers that can give assistance with that. But time is ticking on, and within the customs service, we're actually undertaking exactly the same training. So we've got a number of our staff that are working through an online course, and that seems to be providing some reassurance and comfort for them that they'll be able to handle the additional responsibilities from January.
So the online course, is that available now for businesses to actually get their staff in terms of training and what have you?
Yeah.
That's good. So you mentioned November and the kind of further update in terms of, but I suppose your strong message is don't wait till then to start to make these inquiries and what have you. Yeah. And kind of, if you were to summarise, the takeaways for the listeners today, what would be the key things that you really need them to look at and focus on over the next 2-3 days? What would your priorities be?
Do you want to cover that?
Okay, so I think your main priority is talking to your supplier, identifying where your goods come from and talking to your supplier. You need to really understand that to understand whether or not there is going to be an impact on your current business model. Once you've done that, you can come and talk to us and we can help you through the following steps. We do think you need to consider whether you're going to do the declarations yourself or get an agent to do them. That's another point that I think will need to be addressed fairly soon. You will need to think about whether you apply for a customs procedure and whether that procedure suits your business. That will probably require a conversation with us one-to-one. We can go through what the criteria is for you to become an approved trader. In a nutshell, I think those are the three most important things that we'd like traders to think about.
Okay. And Simon, from your perspective, is there anything you'd add to that in terms of the practicalities?
I think probably another emphasis really on training and actually looking at your current business and identifying somebody at the moment at this stage, if you're not going to use a customs agent, as Paul mentioned, who is going to take that responsibility and put a focus on them to get up to speed, to become familiar with the language and the terminology that's used. And to be as ready as possible, because I think if you're a regular importer and you're going to do this on an ad hoc basis, I think you will come across some difficulties. So I think it's well worth spending some time.
And we've referenced customs agents and everything. If one of our listeners now this afternoon wants to go and identify, where do they go? Does Jersey have customs agents, or is it through the UK? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It is something that's being developed at the moment, so we are not in a position to be able to direct you to any local customs agents, but we are aware of at least 3 fairly big companies who are currently based at the border who will take on that role. And I think once we've confirmed with them that they're looking to pick up that business, we will be putting details on the website so that people can then approach them. I just need to firm up that that's what they want to do, and that's the service that they will be offering.
Okay. Gents, is there anything else before I wrap up this session that you'd like to cover that you don't think we've covered?
No. Well, I think again just to reiterate the message that we've been putting across all morning. Talk to your suppliers. Be prepared, because things will change and they could have significant consequences depending on what your business is. And I think for peace of mind, it's worth doing that, if for no other reason. And we would encourage you to send in any inquiries to us, or if you wish to come in and have a face-to-face, that can also be arranged. So that's really the message from today. And use the online resources. Be aware that we'll be putting more information on in the coming weeks, and that every business is different. One size doesn't fit all, but we'll do what we can to answer those inquiries and help people navigate through what is going to be a challenging period, I think.
Okay. just to conclude, my message from a Jersey business perspective is, and I'd reiterate, 49 days until this happens, and we're in the middle of a pandemic as well. So there's a lot of issues that business leaders are having to deal with right now. But this is something which you do need to prepare for. The information and support is available to you both through Jersey Business, but obviously through gov.g and Paul and Simon. There's critical time factors in terms of what you need to do to deliver. The key message is also communication, both communication with your suppliers, but also communication within your business to ensure that your team are prepared, are trained, and where there are gaps, you seek help. There is a follow-on session this afternoon, I believe, which I'd encourage you to listen into, all part of a series which will hopefully give you more information. But on behalf of Jersey Business, I'd like to thank Paul and Simon for taking time today, and thanking you for listening in, and hopefully you found this useful. And we started by saying the key takeaways. Hopefully you have some of the key takeaways to deliver. There's one question that's quickly come through, which I will just quickly have a look at. For the declarations for EU goods, is there a de minimis limit that provides exemption, e.g. buying something for £10 from Amazon dispatched from Germany?
It depends really on how that good arrives. If the good arrives via the UK and it's managed to arrive here without any interference from HMRC for that purposes, then the de minimis here will apply, so you won't get charged GST. But there is also a de minimis for customs duty, which is set at £135 as well. So for that to kick in, it would all depend on the tariff rate attached to the good. And I would have thought that something valued at £10 is unlikely to have a tariff rate attached to it, which would take it to £135 worth of customs duty. So unless we were told the actual commodity for that good, on the face of it, I would say that it would benefit from the de minimis relief and also from the customs duty relief.
Yeah, but obviously the Amazon point is actually a lot of their distribution is through Luxembourg and Switzerland in terms of coming into the UK.
Amazon is a really interesting scenario that we're still trying to work out. We're not sure yet whether or not people here can still go onto the UK Amazon site and access the EU marketplace. It's not clear as to whether or not that will change. And instead, if you want to buy something from Amazon Luxembourg or Amazon Germany, you would have to log on to Amazon Luxembourg or Amazon Germany. We've asked the question, and we're awaiting a reply, and we're working with Jersey Post. Once that has been established, we'll be able to put some more detail out on that. But it could affect the way that people buy goods, because if it comes direct from Europe, again, the importer here will be faced with doing the customs declaration.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you to all the listeners. As I mentioned, please continue to fire any questions. We will assimilate those together and send a note out afterwards from the team in terms of responses to that. But for this morning, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.